So the whole history of World War II will be up for grabs. The Holocaust deniers are going to make their own industry for Holocaust denialism. They're going to rise in popularity, and there will be no one to come out to say, I was there and I remember what happened. Hitler is going to be seen just like we see Napoleon. But the pro-Israel lobby can holler and cry all at once. It can have all the money that it wants. You can't stop what's coming. And now we have Kanye West doing a song called Heil Hitler. And on YouTube, it has been censored, but it's all over Twitter. Kanye West can't, YouTube can't stop what's coming. This is what I keep trying to tell people. You can't stop what's coming. And now you're going to have teenagers screaming Heil Hitler. Now, you could say it's trolling all you want. That doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't. Because anytime you have people who say nice things about Hitler or Nazis, they always say they're trolling. Everyone uses this argument. And when you actually talk to these so-called trolls in real life, they're actually Nazis. They really believe in it. By trolls, they like to anger people. But they do have a sentiment that is pro-Nazism. And another thing also that you have to keep in mind is, if you are willing to troll for Hitler, you have zero principles. Because that means that you are willing to actually influence people to admire Adolf Hitler. You could say it's trolling all you want, but it's still immoral. And the point is not if this guy is trolling. The point is what I have been talking about for years, and that is normalization. Normalization, that's what we're seeing, you see? Normalization is what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing, is normalization. You could say it's trolling, you could say it's joking, you could say it's just for laughs. Doesn't mean shit. Because back in the day, people used to get their ass whooped for praising Hitler. And back in the day, if you said you loved Hitler, you were looked down on. So what's happening is what? It's a shift. It's a transition in the zeitgeist. We are going from an era that was anti-Hitler into an era that is at least indifferent towards Hitler and at worst pro or sympathetic towards Adolf Hitler. And if we can come to that atmosphere where no one really is morally outraged, or people generally are not morally outraged by praising Hitler, or if we're going to enter an era where people just either are not really bothered by sympathy towards Nazism, or people are tolerating sympathy towards Nazism, or people are just embracing Nazism, then the end result is going to be what? Reviving Nazism. Because if there is no stigma against Nazism, because if we live in a society where people are indifferent or they're pro-Nazism, then what that will mean is what? Nazism will no longer be a stigma. That's exactly what it will mean. Nazism will no longer be a stigma. And if Nazism is no longer a stigma, then Nazism can be revived. And all you need is some German nationalism with a catastrophe that gets people to support Nazis, and the Nazi party is back. It's the normalization of Nazism. And the more normalization that we have, the more it's going to continue. The normalization of evil, ultimately, that's what it is. Yes, the normalization of evil. But it's a specific evil. It's Nazism. And so if we can start getting teenagers and start getting people to scream Heil Hitler in a song, what more do you need to do? Hitler is cool. And everyone's on their iPhones. Everyone's going on X, and they're looking at Nazis on X and the pro-Nazi stuff, and they're looking at these videos, and they're liking the song, and the song is in their head. And it's all there. People are being inundated with this stuff. It's all going to come back. And there's nothing we can do to stop it. Nothing. And there is another step in this policy of normalization, and that is what has been going on in Germany. In Germany, the second biggest party is the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland party. And the AfD is a party that is ran by fanatics, one of whom is Björn Höcke, who wrote articles praising the Third Reich. Bjorn Holke has stated he has expressed his spite against Holocaust memorials. He says that he wants a complete 180-degree turn on how we see the Holocaust. He is a Nazi. He says that the Messiah for Germany will be a great leader who will awaken and will bring glory to the Reich. He is clearly a Nazi. And he is now running the second biggest party in Germany. So you got Nazis coming back in Germany. And on top of that, you have all this normalization of Nazism that is happening. Kanye West with his Heil Hitler song, people screaming, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. And then you see stories like this one. The Germans have been now working very adamantly to give proper burials to Wehrmacht soldiers. Now you say, what's wrong with that? Everyone deserves a proper burial. That's not the point. The point is, if we start focusing on Wehrmacht soldiers getting proper burials, and we start coming up with ideas to memorialize Wehrmacht soldiers, then what's the next step? What is the next step? The next step is SS soldiers. Well, SS soldiers fought for their country. SS soldiers fought for Deutschland. And who is pushing for this memorialization of Nazi soldiers? The AfD, the nationalists, are pushing for it. The nationalists are pushing for it. And there is an organization that is part of the German government. It is called the Volksbund. And the Volksbund has been in charge of exhuming the bodies of Nazi German soldiers so that they can get burials. The AfD is all for it because the AfD wants to memorialize Nazi soldiers so they can then say that the Nazis were the good guys. That's going to be the end result if this continues on, if this trend continues on. This has been going on for years, right? Exhuming the bodies of German soldiers, but it's being pushed now with a lot of enthusiasm because the AfD is pushing it. The AfD is the second biggest party in Germany. Other politicians are also pushing it. But what happens when the Germans really get into memorializing German soldiers? It's going to go from the Wehrmacht to the SS, and then they will start to generalize everything. What's wrong with my English? They will start to generalize everything. They will say, well, everyone suffered in the war. American soldiers and British soldiers have memorials. Why can't German soldiers have memorials here in Germany? Why can't we have memorial events for Nazi soldiers? And then before you know it, SS leaders start getting memorialized. All of a sudden, they're going to have Bach Zalewski, one of the major leaders of the SS, memorialized. They're going to have Himmler memorialized. Pretty soon, Joseph Mengele was a hero. Oh, Ted, that's preposterous. Really? Look at what's been going on in Latvia. In Latvia, they have a national hero named Herberts Cookers, or Zuckers. I call them Cookers. Herberts Cookers was a Nazi mass murderer who was a part of a Nazi Latvian division called the Aris Audis Battalion or something like that. It was a Latvian SS battalion, and he was a mass murderer. And he is memorialized by the far right in Latvia as a hero, and it's come to the point where the Latvian government has come out and said, oh, there's no evidence really to prove that Mr. Cookers is a mass murderer. That trend will begin in Germany if this ideology continues to metastasize in that country. It's going to go from the Wehrmacht to the SS, and then pretty soon, if this continues on, Adolf Hitler is a hero, and you're going to have German soldiers blasting Kanye West as they blitzkrieg into Russia. Don't believe me if you don't want to. I know it sounds crazy, because it does sound crazy, but the truth is stranger than fiction. What is this? Do you think Ye is only a proxy? I think Ye is a psyop, yes. I think there is a greater agenda at hand. I could be wrong, but I think there's a greater agenda that's taking place. What drove Kanye to this madness? I think it was the fact that a Jewish guy started banging his wife and was boasting about it. The Ye angle is more of a distraction. Well, it could be a distraction, but regardless if it's a distraction or not, you're going to have Zoomers and Alphas saying Heil Hitler. And that's just normalization. Just like we have a normalization of Genghis Khan. That's my whole point. German intelligence has removed the extremist classification for the AFD yesterday. It's been suspended, from what I understand. And they are awaiting a ruling by a judge. It's a win-win for the AFD because the AFD can then say, yeah, they tried to call us extremists, but they had to go back because they know that they're full of shit and we got a victory. Or if they resume the designation of the term extremist on the AFD, then the AFD can say that they are the victim and that they are being attacked by the globalists. And this is why you should vote for us because they're trying to stop us because they know that we're going to win. Maybe for the Wehrmacht, but not the SS. You see, here is the problem. The Wehrmacht also did war crimes. The Wehrmacht was the backbone for the Holocaust. Because without the Wehrmacht, you can't really have the Holocaust. The Wehrmacht is what invades Poland. Then from there, you have the Holocaust. Now, I'm not saying every Wehrmacht soldier was evil. Hell, I'm not going to say not everyone who was a member of the Wehrmacht was evil. Because there were Wehrmacht soldiers who became very, very disillusioned with Nazism and they tried to actually save people's lives. And some of them did actually save people's lives from what I understand. So they were righteous people who were in the Wehrmacht. The point is this. The AfD being the second biggest party in Germany is an indication that there is a revival of German ultranationalism. One of the leaders of the AfD is someone who wrote articles praising the Third Reich. They want to memorialize the Wehrmacht soldiers. If this continues on and grows in popularity, the next step is the SS. And if you start memorializing the Wehrmacht, well, why would you memorialize them? They were fighting for which country? The Third Reich. That's who they were fighting for. So you're still praising the army of the Third Reich no matter how you look at it. And in fact, the AfD has already tried to push this narrative because there is an AfD leader by the name of Maximilian Krah. And what Maximilian Krah said was that not exactly what you just said. Not all SS guys were bad. And this is the beginning. This is how they see, this is how evil works. If it is to the advantage of an evil person to emphasize a specific, they will emphasize a specific. If a specific reason ruins their agenda or disproves their ideology, then they will move on to generalizations. If I make an absolute statement and I say the SS was an evil organization, legally speaking, the SS is actually classified as a criminal organization, which it was. The Nazis will begin to point to specifics, and they will say, well, some were actually okay. Some were actually deceived, and they will begin to get into specifics. And by doing this, they make people think, well, wait a second, not all of them were bad. Well, why weren't all of them bad? Well, the SS were trying to fight communists, and communists were mass murderers and were evil, so maybe the SS was actually the good guys. Maybe Hitler was okay, and that's the conclusion. And this is the danger that people are spiraling towards to. That's the problem with all of this. So it says here in this article, critics of the Volksbund have argued that in providing proper burials to Wehrmacht soldiers, the commission indirectly puts their lives on equal footing with the victims of World War II. And you see, this is the problem. Japanese nationalists will also do this. They will say, well, they were people who suffered in all countries during World War II, including Japan. Hold on, but you're not taking into account what the Japanese did in China, where they killed millions of people in China, and how the Japanese invasion of China led to the deaths of tens of millions of people in China. And that's just in China alone. We're not even talking about the victims of Japanese imperialism in the Philippines, in Korea, in Malaysia. The Japanese brought a reign of terror and destruction throughout the areas of Asia that they conquered. But the Japanese nationalists don't want to talk about that. They just want to say, well, everyone suffered. So then what happens? We're not going to talk about the evils of Japan because they want to revive the evils of Japan. What they want to do is generalize everything and say, well, everyone suffered. So let's just say everyone suffered and put it to rest. Let's not talk about the dangers of Japanese fanaticism or Japanese nationalism. Why don't they want to talk about the dangers of Japanese nationalism? Because they're Japanese nationalists. There's nothing wrong with worshiping the emperor. Oh, except, we did just kill tens of millions of people in Asia in the name of the emperor. But everyone suffered. So what they do is they take the evils of Japan and they put it in this ocean of generalizations. And then what happens? In any sort of discourse on the dangers of Japanese nationalism, any talk about the evils of Japanese nationalism is lost in an ocean of the generalization of, well, everyone suffered. And then we're not actually combating the problem at hand. The German nationalists are playing the same game. Well, everyone suffered. And you guys can memorialize your soldiers just like we're going to memorialize ours. But why are you memorializing German soldiers? Unless you actually believe in their cause. You see, if someone were to tell me, Ted, we need to memorialize all the soldiers who fought in Iraq, I'm not really going to be that enthusiastic. Because the war in Iraq was an unrighteous war. It was an unrighteous war, the ripple effects of which we are still dealing with. Ted, we're gonna memorialize all of the Lebanese fighters who fought in the Lebanese civil war against the Palestinians. Well, are we gonna memorialize the Kataib? Because the Kataib did horrendous war crimes of rape and mass murder. I'm not gonna memorialize the Kataib. And going back to the Wehrmacht, if you're gonna memorialize the Wehrmacht, then what say you about the Third Reich? What say you about the Third Reich? Now, we could say, well, those soldiers were fooled and hoodwinked. Okay, fine. A lot of these soldiers were fooled and hoodwinked. But a lot of these soldiers were fighting with the SS. They were fighting alongside the SS, and they knew about the crimes of the SS, and they still didn't give a shit. Why can't we just acknowledge that that there were soldiers who were hoodwinked by an evil empire, and that's it? No, we want to memorialize all the Wehrmacht. The next step is to memorialize the Third Reich. Michael Burleigh deals with this in his History on the Third Reich, and he says that there is this idea that it was just the SS that did war crimes. No, the Wehrmacht also did war crimes. So it says here that a private wrote home in August 1941 saying, what would have happened to cultural Europe had these sons of the steppe, the Russians, poisoned and drunk with a destructive poison, these incited subhumans invaded our beautiful Germany. Endlessly we thank our Führer with love and loyalty, the savior and historical figure. This is written by an average German soldier, praising Hitler as the savior and historical figure, and then describing Russians as subhumans. And believe it or not, all this stuff is coming back, by the way, because the German-Russian tensions continue to rise, and more Germans, you're starting to see it. They see the Russians as orcs and subhuman. There was one member of the Wehrmacht who wrote, only a Jew can be a Bolshevik. For this bloodsucker, there can be nothing nicer than to be a Bolshevik. Wherever one spits, one finds a Jew. As far as I know, not a single Jew has worked in the workers' paradise. Everyone, even the smallest bloodsucker, has a post where he naturally enjoys great privilege. So, Jew became synonymous with communist, and the Nazis believed, the Wehrmacht believed, that they were fighting, that they were there to fight communist terrorists, and that's why they had a right to massacre people. The Wehrmacht was doing it, and the SS was doing it. That's why we don't memorialize the Wehrmacht. And if we start to memorialize them, the end result is going to be memorializing the SS. And if you start memorializing the SS, then you enter into the realm of praising Heinrich Himmler because he was leading the SS. So it's all just it's a ruse. This is all an agenda. It's a conspiracy, really, to help Nazism. Does modern-day Japan memorialize their World War II casualties? Absolutely, they do. They have the Yasukuni Shrine, where war criminals are actually, where it is believed that the souls of war criminals live as kami, and kami literally means gods. So yes, they memorialize war criminals, people who orchestrated the Nanking massacre. The motto of the SS was loyalty for loyalty. Loyalty to who and what exactly? Gott mit uns. Isn't that what the German soldiers would put on their belt? Gott mit uns, Gott with who? God with us. Who's us? The Nazis. So it says here that the Volksbund's activities have also become increasingly muddied with the rise of extremist parties across Europe. For the first time since World War II ended 8 decades ago, a far-right party, the AfD, came in second during the German parliamentary elections on February 23rd, doubling its votes from 2021. The party is a fervent supporter of the Volksbund, of course. So why is the AfD interested in memorializing the Wehrmacht? Because it wants to bring Nazism back. How do you know that? Well, you have to look at all the factors. Its biggest leader, Mr. Bjorn Holke, used to write articles praising the Third Reich. Why in the hell else would he want to memorialize the Wehrmacht? Of course he wants to memorialize the SS also. The party is a fervent supporter of the Volksbund. Its leader, Alice Weidel, called on the German government in October 2024 to provide more financial support to the organization. And by the way, Alice Weidel, I think her grandfather was a Nazi. And Alice Weidel refused to celebrate Victory Day some years ago. She said she was invited to celebrate the victory over the Third Reich by the Russian embassy in Germany, and she refused to attend. Who refuses to celebrate the victory over the Nazis? The left in Germany has criticized the use of public funds for the Volksbund, calling it intolerable. In response, the Volksbund insisted war dead have a right to permanent arrest. There is a danger that the Volksbund becomes instrumentalized, says Darren O'Byrne, a historian of modern Germany at Cambridge University. Although it existed before the AfD, its interests align with those of the party, who are in favor of a more honorable treatment of Germany's war dead. The Volksbund carries out what would be perceived by many as a rather mundane task. There seems to be a broad political consensus among German parties, broadly speaking, of an appreciation of its work. The AfD is not the only party who wants to provide it with public funding. So the AfD is not the only party, which means that this work is going to continue. And because we know for a fact that the German nationalists have been rising up to the point where the AfD is the second biggest party, that means that the memorialization of the Wehrmacht is going to continue alongside the increasing or the intensification of German nationalist fanaticism. So the cult of memorializing the Nazis alongside the rise of German nationalist fanaticism is really spelling a very, very dangerous political phenomenon that is arising as a leviathan in Germany, and it's going to be very, very ugly. On top of that, to make matters even more foreboding, we also have the revival of German militarism happening in our midst. Germany just said no limits on military spending. Germany wants to spend $1 trillion on its military. German investment in German defense companies like Rheinmetall are increasing precipitously. They have been increasing tremendously. Sky high investments in Rheinmetall. So you have militarism, the memorialization of the German Wehrmacht, and the rise of German nationalism. Guys, you know what's happening, right? You know what's happening, right? Nazism is making a comeback. However, the way German history is framed and remembered is also a broader ongoing discussion in the country, especially in far-right circles. Senior figures of the AfD have called for an end of the country's post-war repentance and dubbed the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin a memorial of shame. Why is that? Let's not talk about the Holocaust. Let's embrace the Wehrmacht. Pretty soon we're going to embrace the SS. Let's make the German military stronger. Oh, and by the way, let's get nukes for Germany's military because they want to nuke Russia. It's so surreal what's happening. So it says here, as time now check this out. So it talks about survivors of World War II, etc. And it says here, as time passes, those like Revel is a French guy who fought the Nazis, who were alive during World War II and witnessed events firsthand are becoming fewer and farther between. Once the last victim, perpetrator, or bystander dies, the Third Reich will cease to be a living memory. All that will be left is history. Then we, the living, get to negotiate what lessons we take from it. So the whole history of World War II will be up for grabs. The Holocaust deniers are going to make their own industry for Holocaust denialism. They're going to rise in popularity, and there will be no one to come out to say, I was there and I remember what happened. We're just going to have books and records, and people are going to scrutinize those books and those records, and they're going to say these people exaggerated, these people lied. How do I know that? Just look at the Armenian genocide. Are there survivors of the Armenian genocide? There's a handful of survivors left, and when they were alive during the genocide, they were very, very young. But these people are very old. We're talking like 100 years old. So there's a small handful of Armenian genocide survivors. And what has happened to the Armenian genocide? You have historians here in the United States, mainstream historians here in the US, who aren't even Turkish, writing books about how it didn't happen. You have people coming out saying, nope, it didn't happen. So the Holocaust will go through the same sort of scrutiny. I pick up a book. Genghis Khan killed more people than Adolf Hitler. I pick up a book about Genghis Khan, and I don't find condemnation of Genghis Khan. I find cold, rigid explanations, and I also find scrutinization of the historical records on the atrocities done by the Mongolians. They exaggerated. Those were exaggerations. Nah, I don't believe that. And you will find historians saying, well, the Mongolian Empire, they had a very good postal service. And historians in the future will say, well, the Nazis, they had a very good medical service, and Hitler did fix the economy, and, well, the trains all ran on time. Even Timur never gets shit. Oh, that's another great example. Yes, Timur Lane. Timur Lane, if you read about Timur Lane, oh my gosh, that guy was evil. He was a Mongolian or a Turkic Muslim Shiite. That guy invaded the city of Aleppo. He took the inhabitants of the city, put them all alive in a giant moat, and then proceeded to bury them alive. That was Timur Lane. Do we see people, oh yes, Timur Lane was evil, and no one cares. Why? Because Timur Lane is solely in the realm of history. Once a historical figure is limited to the confines of history and historical narrative, then he is up for grabs. You can interpret him as a hero, you can interpret him as a villain. There is no moral condemnation either or. Back in 2017, there was an Iranian American guy by the name of Jason Georgiani. Now, if you don't know who Jason Georgiani is, he was at one point in time, he was a part of the alt-right movement, or he was at least known in that movement. I know that he was a colleague of Richard Spencer. They did some work together. Jason Georgiani is a guy who glorifies ancient Iran, and he talks about bringing back Zoroastrianism and all that stuff. There was a video that came out back in 2017 because Jason Georgiani was a professor. He was a professor, and he went out for drinks with some people, and he didn't realize that those people were filming him. And he got a little bit drunk, and he said, guys, you watch. He said this back in 2017, and I think he was correct. He said, guys, you watch. Hitler is going to be seen just like we see Napoleon. He lost his job for saying that, but he was right. Hitler will be seen as Napoleon. And Jason Georgiani made another prediction in which he said, you will one day see Hitler on a currency bill in Europe. You will see his face on a bill because he will be seen just like the French see Napoleon. And did not the French do atrocities? The Napoleonic Wars led to the deaths of millions of people. The French Revolution led to the deaths of millions of people. Look at the horrendous atrocities done by the French Revolution. And we have books nowadays written by historians who talk about the good things of the French Revolution and how it was the rise of the poor against the elites, and how the French Revolution ushered in this new era in modern history, etc., etc. I mean, the French Revolution was atrocious. The French Revolution had horrendous atrocities in which people were butchered because they were Catholic, because they refused to acquiesce to the anti-Catholic laws of the revolutionary government. Look at what happened to the Vendeans. The Vendeans are a French ethnic group. If you ever see a Vendean, I actually met a Vendean lady when I was in Italy. You can't tell them apart from other French people. I mean, they're French, but they're very Catholic. And the Vendeans were very Catholic during the 18th century. And they were hiding priests from the revolutionary government, and they refused to send these priests to the government. They were hiding the priests. And so the French government said, okay, you guys aren't really acquiescing to our demands. The Vendeans fought back against the revolutionary government. And so, like Israel, the French revolutionary government said, okay, well, this is our time to do war crimes. And there was a civil war in France after the revolutionary government took over. And the French military entered the Vendean region, and they proceeded to butcher hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people were butchered. If you were Vendean, you were slated for murder. And they would take men and women, strip their clothes off, just like the Nazis forced Jews to strip their clothes off before gassing them to death. They took Vendean women and men, stripped their clothes off, tied them together with ropes, forced them to go into giant ships and sunk the ships and drowned them. And thousands of people were butchered in this manner. They didn't have gas chambers in those days, but they had this method of doing mass murder. Now, just as the Germans stripped Jews naked and forced them into gas chambers, the French rebels stripped people naked, forced them into ships, and then proceeded to sink those ships so that the people inside of them would drown. They didn't have gas chambers during the French Revolution. They had water chambers. And they murdered children as well. There was a letter that you can read from an official of the revolutionary government in which he is boasting about how he trampled over children with his horse. And you can go into a Barnes & Noble and you can find a book on the French Revolution that says very good things about the French Revolution. Why? Because no one today remembers the French Revolution, because everyone from that time period is dead. So the French Revolution is up for grabs. Even the founding fathers of the United States were absolutely disgusted by what was happening in France. But today you have books praising the French Revolution. So that should tell you about what's going to happen with Nazism. When Lyons was crushed after the rebellion against the revolutionary reported back to Paris, Lyons is no more. I looked up the exact quote, Lyons is no more. Look at this. The first result that I get in defense of the French Revolution. Now, there is a line from Heinrich Himmler where Heinrich Himmler is talking about how the Jews are being punished and that they deserve to be punished. And Heinrich Himmler says, his exact words, "We have exterminated a bacterium." This is what he says. We have exterminated a bacterium. He refers to the Jews, he refers to Jewish people as bacterium. And then he says, we have exterminated them and they deserve it. Now, imagine one day taking that quote, we have exterminated a bacterium, putting it in Google, and the first thing you get is, in defense of the Third Reich. Is not the French Revolution praised in France? And France is an ally.